Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, let's learn. Let's get right into it. Episode 22, World War II series from the World War II channel. The Enigma of Germany's Wartime Economy, January 26th, 1940. Let's do it. Hey, Indy.
I have no idea. It's all gibberish.
Getting the weekly news.
January 26, 1940. If only you could read your enemy's messages, but they're coded, and it's one tough code. What to do? It is such an enigma.
I see what you did there, Indy. Enigma codes?
I'm Indy Nidell. This is World War II. Last week, the fighting in the Winter
I heard
War between
the USA used a Native American language like Navajo or Cherokee or something, because it's such a crazy, confusing language that they were actually able to use it for codes. I'm not really positive of that.
This is World War II. Last week, the fighting in the Winter War between the USSR and Finland went fairly quiet in the field for the time being, but a Soviet aerial bombing campaign had begun, even as the Red Army reorganizes and retrains for a huge new series of offensives. And in the West, Adolf Hitler postponed the German invasion until the spring. Here's a quote about the German armed forces from Max Hastings. Germany's paper military strength in the winter of 1939 was only marginally greater than that of the Allies. Hitler's great advantage was that the Allies had made a principled commitment to confront and defeat Nazism while lacking any appetite for the bloody initiatives and human sacrifice required to achieve this. This is a very interesting point. Let's look at Germany in general. While the Allies certainly have problems with troop enthusiasm for this phony war, Germany has all sorts of its own troubles. Contrary to popular belief, Hitler had not been great for the German economy in the 1930s. Average GDP growth had been below the rest of the Western world, and military spending had led to a serious budget deficit. The ideologically restricted system of foreign trade and international sanctions had further exacerbated growth. The only way the Nazis could really counter this was expansion by conquest, which fit like glove on hand with the idea of Lebensraum. They had created a self-fulfilling prophecy. So Germany went to war near bankruptcy. With so little money left for civilian or infrastructure investment, the rail system is in a precarious state and also has a big lack of rolling stock. Passenger service and coal deliveries have big problems, so no, the trains don't run on time.
I know I'm in from hindsight again, but if I see a country that was devastated and was defeated in World War I, and then in the 1930s, their GDP growth is still behind that of other nations, and yet their military spending is going very far up, it sounds like they're going to try and get out of it through invading, but I know hindsight is 2020, so I don't want to make too much of a deal of that.
Beefing up the military led to the industrial workforce of over 24 million people losing a sixth of that problem, so no, the trains don't run on time. Beefing up the military led to the industrial workforce of over 24 million people losing a sixth of that in the past 6 months. Steel shortages caused production cuts, and as for the armed forces, the generals think the Army is short of all kinds of vehicles, and Admiral Rader thinks the Navy weak to the point that it is not at all adequately armed for the great struggle. It can only demonstrate that it knows how to go down with dignity. But do the Allies really have the stomach for such a great struggle? Are they prepared during these months of inactivity? The French army has been widely considered the strongest army in Europe and easily capable of defending France. But there are those who do not share this belief. Even back in 1935, for example, Soviet Marshal Mikhail Tukhachevsky said he did not think the French army could withstand a German attack because he thought it was too slow to react, right? This
Question, guys. Oh, well, he was kind of right.
was not so much just because...
Question, guys. Do you think if the Soviet Union was if the Cold War never existed and the Soviets and the Americans and the other allies got along great after the war, do you think that Germany would have been treated more like they were after World War One, rather than getting a bunch of money through the Marshall Plan? I wonder how much of rebuilding Germany and Japan, just take Germany for example, rather than punishing them as much as they were after World War One. I'm sure they were punished in many ways, but in bringing that up, if that was more of a way to counter the Soviets, or if it was more of a lesson learned that if you just pummel a defeated enemy into the ground, then it makes way for strongmen leaders getting into power and maybe eventually another war. I know it's not entirely important for this video, but I thought of it. So
Tukhachevsky shared this belief. Even back in 1935, for example, Soviet Marshal Mikhail Tukhachevsky said he did not think the French army could withstand a German attack because he thought it was too slow to react, right? This was not so much just because of a stiff defensive posture, but what he saw as a serious lack of radio communications. The Germans broke the French radio codes in 1938 anyhow. And the French army is cumbersome and old-fashioned, it's true. The reforms and reorganizations under Philippe Pétain in 1918 had made the French army...
I love saying that name, and I know he would be the head of kind of Vichy France, so... Philippe Pétain. I love saying that.
The end of world organizations under Philippe Pétain in 1918 had made the French army at the end of World War I the most modern and best equipped in the world. But that was 20 years ago, and doctrines, particularly for mobile warfare, have changed. France is behind the curve. In fact, this week on the 26th, Charles de Gaulle submits a memo to High Command that calls for a reappraisal of their approach to mechanized warfare. It begins like this. We began the war with 5 million soldiers, yet our aerial forces are only now being equipped, and our armored vehicles are too weak and too few in number. He thinks hostilities are going to seriously expand. And as for the soldiers suffering the boredom of inaction, the French soldiers do not shoot at the German soldiers opposite them who wander around.
Guys, I just want to point out with the artillery, why is it that I see the armor in front of the artillery is great, but I always see people actually firing and operating the artillery aren't usually behind it. So it almost is like, what's the point?
Number. And as for the soldiers suffering the boredom of inaction, the French soldiers do not shoot at the German soldiers opposite them who wander around in view, and German propaganda hammers home repeatedly that the British are going to have the French shoulder the burden of the war. There are few to zero training exercises. Soldiers get drunk, they go AWOL. One soldier writes, "We lie stretched out on the straw, yawning, and even get a taste for doing nothing. We wash less and less. We don't bother to shave anymore. We can't raise the effort to sweep the place or clear the table after eating. Along with boredom, filth dominates the base."
It's so difficult for me to put myself in the shoes of, say, the French or the British right before the invasion of France, because it's such a giant conflict, and I know France is about to be conquered by the Germans. It's so difficult for me to put myself in their shoes, and like how worried really are you? They don't seem too worried, but just knowing what happens, I'm like, what are you doing? Just get going. But they don't know that.
To its credit, the French High Command sends stars like Josephine Baker and Maurice Chevalier to entertain the troops. But that's kind of all they do. And the winter drags on and on, and the Germans have yet to attack. The Allies are, obviously, eager for any information as to when the Germans might attack. I mean, sometimes they get lucky, like with the Michelin incident a couple weeks ago. Sometimes they get some info from Colonel Oster, but that's mostly last-minute tips, and you can't count on that coming. What you really need is to be able to read the messages sent using the German super secret and super encrypted communication system Enigma. Now, Enigma is a rotary machine cipher invented by Arthur Scherbius. He actually patented his rotating wheel cipher back in February 1918 during World War I. The German army was running trials on Enigma in 1932, by which time Scherbius was dead, and Polish cryptanalyst and mathematician Marian Rejewski had, with information obtained from a French spy, cracked the Enigma message keys so that the Poles could build their own Enigma doubles. In 1938, however, the Germans added more rotors to their machines, which increased their complexity to the point where the Poles did not have the resources to keep up with decryption. As the political situation between Poland and Germany deteriorated last summer, the Poles shared their Enigma knowledge with their allies, and since then, cracking Enigma has been a joint Anglo-French effort.
So, cracking Enigma, does anyone know what that actually means? Are you just trying to find a sort of equation? Like, are you trying to figure out the equation to just to see at like what means what? Does that make sense? I don't know.
The first breakthrough comes this week on January 20th at Bletchley Park in England. Dilly Knox's team, which includes John Jeffries and Alan Turing, crack a German administrative code that Bletchley calls the Green, and is a key that had been used back on October 28th. The Germans change codes every day, so this key is no practical use. It is rather a breakthrough of method, and it does.
So is it essentially like trying to decipher a language that you don't know?
Doesn't give this key is no practical use. It is rather a breakthrough of method, and it doesn't give the Allies any immediate benefits, but it does point them very much in the right direction. Turing's design for an electromechanical...
I'm so confused about this, and then I'm not paying attention when... I'm just trying to get my water.
Of method every day, so this key is no practical use. It is rather a breakthrough of method, and it doesn't give the Allies any immediate benefits, but it does point them very much in the right direction. Turing's design for an electromechanical device called the bomb, which was developed based on the Polish machines called bomba, will ideally identify the wheel order, the rotary start positions, and the partners of specific letters, and will first arrive in March, and the code-breaking work will continue in earnest. And maybe one day, they'll be able to learn the German plans. Well, other people are planning too, of course. The Soviets have been making big plans for their upcoming offensive against the Finns. As I said last week, artillery is a big part of those plans. Each mile of the front will be covered by 80 artillery pieces. The Soviets are going to attack...
So shouldn't you, if you have a coding thing that you're worried that you're using for your own missions and stuff, your own military, don't you want people to be working on replacement codes that use a totally different type of pattern so that you can switch it every 6 months or so?
In a wedge, and at the tip of by 80 artillery pieces.
Whoa,
the Soviets are going to attack
artillery.
in a wedge, and at the tip of that wedge, the Viipuri Gateway, a 10-mile stretch between the Sumajoki River and Lake Moilanjärvi of comparatively open ground good for tanks. 108 big guns are allotted. There's also going to be some real tactical deployment of direct fire against the Finnish concrete pillboxes. The Poppius Bunker, for example, is an incredibly strong defense fortress near the Rhode that changed hands several times last month. But though it had been pounded again and again by artillery, still firing back. So now, after a few diversionary barrages, the Soviets have managed to bring in a 6-inch cannon to just 500 meters away, totally camouflaged and ready for action. This is repeated near several other Finnish strongpoints.
Are those train car wheels? I couldn't imagine a worse option to... Well, it's in black and white photo, so maybe that's rubber. But those just look like steel. I saw the other one had treads on it. This seems not ideal. Maybe this is transported on train tracks.
in a 6-inch cannon to just 500 meters away, totally camouflaged and ready for action. This is repeated near several other Finnish strongpoints. When General Semyon Timoshenko gives the signal for the offensive to begin, 300,000 shells will hit the Viipuri gateway the first 24
Jesus Christ.
hours, and you'll be able to hear it all the way in Helsinki. The bombardment will begin next week.
300,000 shells. That's like more than 3,000 per hour, right? Or 30,000. Or 10,000. A lot.
And many soldiers will lose their lives. But it isn't just soldiers losing their lives in the European wars. On January 22nd, the death toll of Polish civilians since September 1st is estimated at 15,000, though we now know that it's much higher. Pope Pius XII broadcasts from the Vatican the horror and inexcusable excesses committed on a helpless and a homeless people have been established by the unimpeachable testimony of eyewitnesses. That same day, Major General Friedrich Meade, Chief of Staff of the German First Army, tells his officers that the mass executions the SS has carried out without proper trials has sullied the honor of the whole German army.
He kind of looks like FDR a little bit. His face. I thought I heard some not so great stuff about this Pope kind of collaborating with the Germans, but I could have been... I am not sure, and maybe I was very wrong because he's clearly pointing something out.
German First Army tells his officers that the mass executions the SS has carried out without proper trials has sullied the honor of the whole German army. But of course, his voice is not the voice in command. But life is changing there even for the rest of the population. On January 25th, Hans Frank issues orders to redesign the Polish economy in the general government region to increase Germany's military capability. Poland will provide raw materials, chemicals, and manpower. This is the idea. Preparations and transportation into the Reich of not fewer than 1 million male and female agricultural and industrial workers in order to safeguard agricultural production in the Reich and supply the deficiency of industrial labor in the Reich. So basically, the slave labor system, which has already been applied to Czechs and Jews, is now going to apply to Poles to help solve some of the German problems I mentioned earlier. As for the Jews, on the 24th, Reinhard Heydrich is appointed by Hermann Goering to find the solution to the Jewish question. And that is the week. All sorts of problems for both armies in the West, a ray of hope in the quest to crack Enigma, and plans proceeding to smash even the heaviest of the Finnish defenses. Oh, and on the 20th, plans for Operation Catherine are shelved. What's that? You'll find out next week. Something...
This guy's, he has an interesting look, almost like an alien. I don't want to be mean. I mean, he's a Nazi. I don't want to be mean. I don't want to be mean to the guy that's trying to construct a concentration camp. Never mind. He looks like... Never mind. Sorry.
By Hermann Goering to find the solution, though, on the 26th. Basil Ray is an Englishman of Scots ancestry living... You'll find out next week. Something else happened this week, though, on the 26th. Basil Ray is an Englishman of Scots ancestry living in Egypt. He works with the Egyptian Ministry of Education. Actually, in the future, he will serve with the Royal Air Force during the war, and post-war will be the secretary of what is, in 2018, the International Tennis Federation. It will be he who bans Rhodesia and South Africa from the Davis Cup in 1971 because of apartheid. He will also eventually be S. Basil Ray, OBE. That is all in the future. Right now, he is in Egypt with his wife Beatrice and their son Christopher, and today they are joined by a daughter. Her name is Joy. She is my mother. Today, January 26, 1940, is my mother's actual date of birth.
Wow.
This stuff really didn't happen that long ago. Happy birthday, Mom.
That was great. Happy birthday, Indy's mother. Mrs. Nidell. I haven't seen Sabaton History in a while. I gotta watch one of those episodes. Yeah, great video. Hopefully I didn't say any too ridiculous things, but interesting. Love y'all. Hope you're all doing well. Would appreciate any comments down below. If you disagree with something I said or answer any of my questions, you guys are always great in the comments. See you guys next time. We'll keep on learning. Bye.